Hello, my name is Sam, and I want to tell you a story that makes me tremble just thinking about it. This is the story of the summoning at my grandfather's house. It all started on the cursed day my grandfather passed away. He was a very good man, but his death was the beginning of a nightmare that chilled us to the bone. For a few days, all the cousins, that's me, Nilufar, Sahra, Milad, and Farzad, were gathered at my grandfather's house. It was a large, old building on a quiet street, and it always had this distinct smell, a mix of damp earth and ancient wood. It was the smell of memories, of our childhood and all the mischief we got into. We all loved our grandfather dearly and missed him terribly. During those days, the adults were busy with funeral rites and receiving condolences. As usual, whenever we kids got together, we'd find a quiet corner for ourselves. We spent most of our time in a room at the back of the courtyard, which my grandfather had used for storage. We called it the Room of Secrets. One evening, as darkness fell, a light rain began to tap against the old windows, creating a false sense of security. The five of us were sitting together when Nilufar, who was always the bravest and most curious of us all, said, "Guys, I have an idea." Farzad, the youngest and a bit of a scaredy cat, looked at her with wide eyes. "What is it, Nilufar?" A mischievous smile spread across her face. "Let's summon Grandpa's spirit." At first we all laughed, thinking she was joking. Sahra, who was always the most logical one, said, "Nilufar, are you crazy? That's just superstition." But Milad, who always craved excitement, his eyes lit up. "Are you serious, Nilufar? How?" I was always a sucker for this kind of stuff, so I chimed in, "Yeah, how?" Nilufar explained seriously, "I read about it online. We have to write the alphabet on a piece of paper, then place a saucer upside down on it. We ask the spirit to answer our questions by moving the saucer." Farzad's face went pale. But what if something else comes?" Nilufar scoffed. "What something else? It's all fake. It's just for fun." Even though I had a vague, unsettling feeling in the pit of my stomach, my curiosity won. We found a large sheet of paper and wrote the letters of the alphabet in a circle. In the middle, we wrote yes, no, don't know, and goodbye. We grabbed an old porcelain saucer from the kitchen, one that had belonged to our grandfather. We turned down the lights, leaving only a small night lamp, casting a dim yellow glow. We sat in a circle around the paper and gently placed our index fingers on the upturned saucer. My heart was pounding, a mix of excitement and fear. I was in the middle of my late teens, and the boys were being very careful. Nilufar, the boldest among us, began, "Spirit of our grandfather, if you are present in this place, move the saucer." Silence for a few seconds. The only sound was the rain. Nothing happened. Farzad let out a sigh of relief. Sahra smirked. Nilufar tried again. "Grandfather, if you're here, give us a sign." Suddenly, the saucer twitched, just a tiny little movement. We all fell silent. Milad's eyes were wide. What was that?
I said doubtfully, "Maybe it was one of us." Sahra pointed at me. "Meysam, you definitely moved it." I swore I hadn't. Nilufar, her voice firmer this time, repeated the call. "Grandfather, if this is you, move the saucer to yes." Slowly, very slowly, the saucer began to glide across the paper. It wasn't fast or forced. It was a smooth, steady motion. We all held our breath. Farzad was visibly shaking, and Sahra's eyes were wide with disbelief. It reached yes and stopped. Nilufar asked excitedly, "Grandfather, are you okay?" The saucer moved to yes. Milad, his voice trembling, asked, "Grandfather, do you miss us?" Again, it moved to yes. I had a strange feeling, a mix of terror and thrill. I couldn't believe it. I asked, "Grandfather, for God's sake, tell us what the afterlife is like." The saucer began to move across the letters, spelling out a word, S-I-L-E-N-T. Silent. Why silent? Why silent? Nilufar asked softly, "Grandfather, why are you silent?" The saucer moved again. Why? Oh, you must know. A cold shiver went down my spine. This wasn't a game anymore. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. We all looked at each other in horror. Then Sahra said, "Let's ask him if his prayers were of any use to him." The moment she asked the question, the lamp went out. A deep, horrifying voice echoed in the darkness. "Prayer is a great lie." Farzad started crying. I'm scared." Sahra said, terrified, "Those words, that's not our grandfather." I had an idea. I said, "I swear on your loved ones, are you our grandfather?" The saucer began to move again, this time faster, with a particular violence. "No." Nilufar stammered, Then who are you?" The saucer moved again, spelling out a name we had never heard before. Z-A-R-B-I-L. Zarbil. We stared at each other. Zarbil. With a trembling voice, Nilufar asked the final question. "Are you a Jinn?" The saucer shot to yes with terrifying speed. A muffled scream escaped from Milad and Farzad. Sahra had her eyes squeezed shut in terror. I was frozen in place. None of us dared to ask another question. But the saucer moved on its own, without any of us touching it. It spelled one last word, R-E-V-E-N-G-E. Revenge! Revenge! From who? Why? What did we do? Suddenly, there was a sound like an explosion. The light bulb shattered. The saucer was thrown across the room and smashed into pieces. We screamed and scrambled out of the room, fleeing in terror back towards the main house. Our faces were white with fear. Nilufar, her eyes wide of shock, stared at us and said, "Guys, forget what happened tonight. Don't say a word to anyone, okay?" But that thing said it wants revenge." "Don't think about it anymore," Sahra pleaded. "Nilufar is right. Let's just forget everything." We rushed back to our families and tried to act like nothing happened. We tried to forget. But from that night on, our lives turned into a living hell. The Jinn, Zarbil, had entered our lives, and it intended to torment us to the brink of death.
The strange occurrences began that very night. We all slept in the same room. Farzad, terrified, had fallen asleep in Nilofar's arms. Sahra, Milad, and I were lying next to each other. It was around 3 a.m. when I heard a rustling sound from the corner of the room. I thought it was a mouse and tried to ignore it. But the sound grew closer. It sounded like something was being dragged across the floor. I opened my eyes. The room was dark, but I thought I saw a shadow moving on the wall. It was tall and slender, like a thin man pacing back and forth. My breath caught in my throat. I wanted to scream, but no sound would come out. The shadow drifted towards our beds. Suddenly, I felt an icy, bony hand clamp down on my leg. I was frozen solid. I managed a choked, muffled scream. Nilofar woke up instantly. "Miss Sam, what's wrong?" In that exact moment, the shadow vanished, and the cold feeling left my leg. I lied. "It's nothing," I said, my voice shaking. "Just a nightmare." I didn't want to frighten the others, but I knew it wasn't a dream. The next day, the bizarre events continued. We were in the kitchen while my mom was preparing breakfast. Suddenly, every plate, spoon, and fork flew out of the cabinets and crashed onto the floor. My mom jumped in fear, crying out, "An earthquake!" But the ground hadn't shaken. Only the dishes had fallen. No one had been near them. The 5 of us exchanged a knowing, terrified look. We knew whose work this was. The second night was worse. Sahra was taking a shower when we heard her scream. We all rushed to the bathroom and threw open the door. She was standing in the middle of the room, wrapped in a towel, pale and trembling. "Sahra, what happened?" my mom asked, rushing to her side. "Auntie," Sahra said, her voice filled with horror. "It felt like someone pulled my hair, hard." "Who?" my mom asked, looking around. "There's no one else in here." Sahra's terrified eyes darted towards us. Nilofar, thinking fast, forced a laugh. "Oh, Auntie, it's nothing. Sahra is probably just imagining things." With some effort, she managed to usher my mom out of the room. The second she was gone, Nilofar ran to Sahra. "What happened?" Sahra burst into tears. "I swear I'm not lying," she sobbed. "I was washing my hair with my eyes closed when the air in the bathroom turned freezing cold. I thought the water had gone icy, but in that same moment, it felt like a long hand grabbed a fistful of my hair and yanked it so hard I felt like I was lifted off the ground." We all looked at each other. We knew she wasn't lying. We were terrified and had no idea what to do. From that day on, none of us dared to be alone. We went to the bathroom in a group of 5. We slept together. We ate together. But the Jinn, Zarbil, would not leave us alone. One night, we were all in the room. Farzad had a fever from the constant fear, and Nilofar was dabbing his forehead with a wet cloth. Suddenly, I heard the sound of fingernails scratching the wall. The scraping grew louder, as if something was crawling on the other side. Then came a tapping on the door. Tap, ta-tap, tap-tap. The knocking grew louder and more frantic with each passing second, as if it was being done with pure, malicious intent. "Who's there?" Nilofar asked, her voice trembling. "It is Zarbil." Farzad screamed. Milad hid under the covers.
Sahra was crying silently. I was frozen with fear. Nilofar gathered her courage and shouted, "What do you want from us? Leave us alone!" The laughter grew louder. "You will all die. A heavy price awaits you." Then the knocking turned into violent pounding, as if it was trying to break down the door. Boom, boom, boom! The door shuddered in its frame. The 5 of us huddled together, shaking uncontrollably. Suddenly, we heard my mom's voice from the hallway. "Kids, what's going on? Why are you making so much noise?" The pounding stopped. The room fell silent again. My mom opened the door. What happened? The 5 of us just stared at her with wide, horrified eyes. We didn't know what to say. How could we explain that a Jinn was tormenting us? Seeing our terrified faces, my mom, true to her habit, recited a few verses from the Quran, Ayat al-Kursi, and blew the prayer into the corners of the room before leaving. My mom was the most devout of all her siblings, her prayers a constant in her life. That night, after she had prayed, we heard no more sounds and finally fell into an exhausted sleep. But the strange and terrible things only got worse with each passing day. One time we were playing in the yard. The soccer ball was in my hands when it was suddenly ripped from my grasp, shot high into the sky, and then rocketed back down, striking Farzad hard on the head. He fell unconscious. We rushed him to the doctor, who said he had a mild concussion. Another time, Milad was studying in his room. All the books on his shelf suddenly flew off and were hurled at him with great force. One of the books hit him in the face and broke his nose. Sahra started having nightmares. She would see Zarbil with terrifying red eyes, staring at her and laughing. She would wake up screaming and cry from fear until morning. One night I myself woke up feeling like someone was strangling me. I couldn't breathe. It felt like an invisible hand was wrapped around my throat. I thrashed with all my might until finally the sensation was gone. I had nightmares every night after that. Our condition deteriorated day by day. We grew thin, our eyes became sunken, and a hidden fear was always present in our gaze. The adults assumed we were still grieving for our grandfather, or that it was just teenage angst and we were being dramatic. No one believed us. Finally, my mom, who had witnessed our drastic changes and was a deeply religious woman, gathered us all together one day. She looked at us with hesitation and said, "Kids, tell me the truth. What has gone on? Why have you been in such a state? Why are you so scared? What has happened to you?" At first, we said nothing. We were afraid. But my mom spoke gently. "Tell me, maybe I can help you." Nilofar broke down and cried. We did something." Then she told my mom everything, from the very beginning. The summoning of our grandfather's spirit, the arrival of Zarbil, all the horrifying things that had happened to us. My mom listened, stunned, her face growing pale as Nilofar spoke. When she finished, she took a deep breath. "So that's what it was. I always had a bad feeling about this house. Don't worry, children," she added, her voice now firm. "I'll help you. We have to find a way." From that day on, my mom searched for a solution. She spoke to anyone she thought might be able to help, from the old women in the neighborhood to religious scholars. One day a neighbor gave her an address. It was for a Seyyed, a holy man in a remote village. "He is a good man," the neighbor said. "He is in contact with the other world." Without a moment's hesitation, my mom packed us into the car and we set off. The journey was long. We left the city behind and drove onto winding, unpaved roads. The Seyyed's house was nestled deep in the mountains, ancient and quiet. It was already dark when we arrived. His house was a simple mud brick home. We knocked. A middle-aged man with a long beard and piercing eyes opened the door. His face radiated a profound sense of peace. My mom immediately told him our story. The Seyyed listened intently. When she finished, he looked at each of us, a deep, knowing gaze that felt like it was seeing into our souls. "It is true," he said. "A demonic jinn has entered your lives. It has been in this house for a very long time. When you summoned and mocked it with your game, it became enraged and now seeks revenge." We were shocked by his words. It had been in our grandfather's house all along? "This will be difficult," the Seyyed said. "This jinn is very powerful, but do not lose hope. With God's help, you can be saved." The Seyyed began his work. First, he told us we would have to stay at his house for a few days. Then every morning and evening, he would gather us and begin to recite prayers and incantations.
His voice was calming, but his words held a strange power. On the first day, as the Seyyed was chanting, we heard a loud, high-pitched woman scream from the courtyard. We all jumped in fear. "Do not be afraid," the Seyyed said calmly. "It is him. He wants to mislead you. Do not fall for his tricks. Be calm." Then came the sound of shattering glass, as if something was being thrown violently against a window. The Seyyed raised his voice, chanting louder. The sounds of screaming and breaking glass slowly faded away. On the second day, as he prayed, a foul, repulsive stench filled the room, the smell of rot and decay. It was so bad we all felt sick. "This is his scent," the Seyyed explained. "He is resisting. Do not worry." Soon the terrible smell began to dissipate. On the third day, as the Seyyed chanted, we suddenly felt an immense pressure on our chests, as if a massive stone had been placed upon us. We couldn't breathe, and our vision began to go dark. The Seyyed began to chant louder and more forcefully, speaking words in a language we did not understand. He chanted louder and louder, while we remained pinned down by the suffocating weight. Suddenly, the Seyyed shouted a final, powerful invocation. In that exact instant, we all felt a sense of release. The pressure on our chests was gone. We took deep, gasping breaths. The Seyyed continued the prayers and incantations for several more days. With each day that passed, we felt lighter. The constant fear and horror began to recede from our souls. On the last night, the Seyyed told us that the Jinn had left our grandfather's house and our lives. However, he said we had to perform certain tasks to ensure it would never return. He instructed us to cleanse the house with salt and water while playing a recitation of Surah Al-Baqarah, a chapter from the Quran. And he warned, we must never, ever attempt to summon spirits again. He gave each of us a small written prayer, telling us to keep it hidden under our clothes, always with us to shield us from such beings. When we returned to my grandfather's house, the feeling was completely different. The house no longer had that heavy, oppressive atmosphere of fear. It felt peaceful. With my mom's help, we cleansed the house as we were told, playing the Quranic verses and washing every corner with salt and water. From that day forward, none of the strange and terrifying events ever happened again. The nightmares ended, the fear was gone. The five of us, my son, Nilufar, Sahra, Milad, and Farzad, learned a great lesson from that bitter experience. Do not play with things you do not understand, and that there are other worlds, unseen, that we know nothing about.
Even now, when I remember those days, a cold shiver runs down my spine. But I know that we were saved from that nightmare, thanks to God and the help of that venerable Seyyed. And since that day, not only have we never thought of summoning spirits again, but we now run from anything related to the supernatural.